How to write a second verse. You finish the chorus in the first verse and you feel stuck. You don't know what else to say. You don't know what to write about. And you start feeling like you won't finish your song. In this video, I'll show you how to solve second verse curse and to finish your song. Then I'll show you how to avoid it entirely in the future so you don't have this problem ever again. Hi, I'm Trevor Dimoff. I transform musicians into songwriters at epicsongwriting.com. Watch the entire video and then click the description link for a transcript of the video and more songwriting help so that you follow through on what you've learned in this video, instead of just bouncing to the next YouTube video and forgetting to even try it out. Getting stuck on your second verse has two main components. What do I write about? That is, what do I say? And secondly, exactly how do I write a second verse? Once we've solved both of those, I'll explain how to avoid the entire problem in the future. First, 2 sentences of basic songwriting theory. The chorus is usually about emotions. What does the song make the audience feel, or what is the singer or narrator of the song feeling? And the verse is where you write details of the story. First, what do I write about in the second verse? For a second verse, you continue the story. The second verse curse hits you when you don't have a story figured out. You're just faking your way through, hoping to find some ideas that fall into place. That's why you got stuck. For second verse ideas, continue the story. Get further into the action or situation with more details. What happens after the first verse? What's the rest of the story? If the first verse is a cause, then the second verse can describe the effects of the situation. You can change the angle or perspective. It's usually more effective to get closer to the action or situation. Get closer and turn it up to make it more intense. What other details can you add? What's the next step in the story? What are the results of the first verse? You can repeat the main idea of the first verse and explain it again with different details and imagery. But be sure to advance the story and show more. Otherwise, you're just wasting time restating yourself. You can also consider making the existing verse the second verse and writing a new verse to set up the story. That is, instead of continuing the story, write a new beginning to the story with a different verse. In movie script writing, it's common to open the movie with an intense scene to hook the audience, and then circle back later to explain what's going on. To use this technique in songwriting, start your song with a compelling first verse and explain the details of the situation later in the second verse. I've also written 3 or more verses and then edited them down to 2 verses using the best ideas from each and putting them in the best order for the flow of the story in the song. If you still feel stuck with the second verse, write out a story in point form so you have an overview of what you're trying to communicate. Get the plot and the story arc mapped out to organize your thinking. Think about your first verse and chorus and ask yourself who, what, where, when, and why, and how to get more ideas to continue the second verse. How to actually write the second verse. Use the first verse as a template. Use the same rhyme scheme, melody, and chord progression. If your first verse is already written, the second verse is usually less work because you've already made some big creative decisions. The second verse needs different lyrics, different rhyming words, and more story to continue the song. Because you'll use the same melody in both verses, the easiest way to actually write the lyrics of the second verse is to use the same accented syllable patterns of the first verse. Typically, when you set lyrics to a melody, the accented syllables are higher in pitch and are sung longer than non-accented syllables. Don't just count the syllables. That's a lyricist's solution that doesn't always work when you're writing a melody. I've written verses with identical syllable counts that needed different melodies because of different accent patterns. Find the accented syllables by reading the lyrics in an exaggerated voice. Then, write with a similar accent pattern so the melody fits. As you're writing the second verse lyrics, match the accent patterns of the first verse. It's okay to have a few slightly different syllable counts. You can add or remove a syllable here and there and still sing them with the same melody. Even if it isn't perfect, finish the draft of the verse. You can always go back and adjust the verses to match the same melody in a later draft. Don't get stuck thinking you have to write a finished draft on the first go-through. You can always tweak details later. Write a draft with a song mostly done, and then improve it through later drafts. How to avoid the second verse curse in the future. Start by planning your songs before you get deep into the songwriting process. I brainstorm ideas and lyric phrases before I finish writing the first song section. I'll start with a song inspiration or idea and have a little fun with it, but then I get busy mapping out the plot of the song with a song sketch. I start with the big idea or title and figure out the story I want to tell. Then, I decide what I'll write about in the chorus, the verses, the pre-chorus, and the bridge before I write them. It sounds boring because you don't get to immediately dive in and find the flow and write lyric lines. That's the fun part. But it's much faster when I already have a song framework figured out. There's no wondering what do I write about or racking my brain struggling with ideas. When I brainstorm lyric fragments, I can easily decide which song section they'll fit. I'll take a page of brainstormed ideas and find the best phrases and quickly sort them. That's a verse idea. That fits in the chorus. That should go on the first verse. That's for the second verse. That's the first verse. That's the bridge. There's no struggle when you've created a plan to follow. It channels your creativity and gives you a direction. It doesn't stifle your creativity. A plan provides clarity and lets you avoid creative dead ends and wasted time. And most importantly, you don't end up with wasted songs that you don't finish. Do the work and plan out your song instead of getting lost in the songwriting process. Then you don't waste time rambling around, desperately hoping to find your way from the beginning of the song to the end. Creativity rarely works in a straight line. To summarize, the second verse is a continuation of the story that you started with the first verse and the chorus. Find more to say by exploring the story you're telling. Ask yourself the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why, and the how. In the second verse, give more details to advance the plot so that your audience stays interested and listens to the whole song. The second verse follows the patterns that you've established in the first verse using the same rhyme scheme, melody, and chord progression. Write lyrics with the same patterns of accented syllables and it'll sing to the same melody. To avoid writing yourself into a dead end, plan the story that you want to tell before you write the first verse. It seems counterintuitive, but a few minutes of planning can save you hours of frustration, and it makes finishing your songs much easier. Thanks for watching the whole video. I'm Trevor Dimmoff. I transform musicians into songwriters at epicsongwriting.com. Click the link in the description for more to help you follow through on these ideas so that you actually change your songwriting practice for the better instead of forgetting all of these ideas. Once you've done that, go write a solid second verse.